I was released from the hospital a day early, and when I came home, I saw my. It was supposed to be a quiet return home. A day early, no fanfare, just the comfort of familiar walls and the man she called her husband. But sometimes life doesn't wait for the curtain to rise before it reveals the truth. What Lena Whitmore saw when she walked through that door didn't just end a chapter. It unraveled everything. And it all started with silence, a key that no longer fit. The nurse's smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she handed Lena Whitmore the discharge papers. "You're good to go, Miss Whitmore. Doctor signed off early," she said. "Your recovery is ahead of schedule." Lena gave a faint nod, though the dull ache in her chest reminded her she wasn't quite whole yet. 3 nights in a hospital bed after a cardiac procedure, nights spent listening to machines hum, fluorescent lights flickering above, and not a single visit from her husband, Victor Dalton. He had texted once, claiming hospitals made him anxious, said the smell of antiseptic turned his stomach. But what hurt wasn't the excuse. It was the silence, the absence, the empty hours where love should have shown up and didn't. Lena told herself not to overthink it. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Maybe he just didn't know how to deal. Still, somewhere beneath the gauze and stitches, something in her had already begun to detach. The cab ride home was quiet. The city outside moved like a blur, but Lena's thoughts were slower, heavy. She thought about the way sunlight hit their kitchen floor in the morning, about the smell of Victor's cologne lingering on throw pillows, about the comfort of their bed. She wondered if he'd be surprised to see her home early. Maybe he'd smile. Maybe he'd cry. As the car pulled into the driveway, that gentle fantasy cracked. Victor's car was already there, parked not straight, but haphazardly across the bricks like he'd rushed in and never looked back. That wasn't like him. He prided himself on appearances, on order. Lena stared at the car a second too long, a dull weight pressing against her sternum, one knot caused by surgery. She paid the fare, stepped out, and lifted her overnight bag, moving toward the door. The house was still lights off downstairs. No music, no smell of dinner, only a dim, pulsing glow from upstairs. She didn't call out. She didn't announce her arrival. Something told her not to. Something deeper than suspicion and instinct. She climbed the stairs, the creaking beneath her feet louder than usual, and stopped outside their bedroom. The door was slightly ajar. The light inside cast a warm but distorted hue. Lena pushed gently, almost hoping it would be empty, but it wasn't. Victor was there, and so was a woman Lena had never seen. They were tangled together in the bed they had bought 5 years ago. The one he had once joked was too firm, the one they had chosen after testing half the showroom. His laughter, light, breathless, cut through her sharper than any blade. The sheets were pulled halfway over them. Her pillow had been tossed aside. The nightstand still held their wedding photo, tilted at an odd angle, as if watching the whole thing unfold in stunned silence. Lena didn't move. She didn't gasp. She didn't speak. The world had gone completely quiet. Her breath was shallow. Her eyes didn't blink. The pain wasn't explosive. It was hollow, a cavernous ache that started somewhere in her spine and echoed through her chest. They didn't see her. Not yet. Too lost in their moment. Too sure she wouldn't be there. 10 seconds passed. Maybe more. Time folded in on itself. Then Lena stepped back slowly, carefully. No anger, no drama. She walked down the stairs with the same stillness she used to navigate minefields overseas. Back to the waiting cab, engines still idling. The driver glanced at her. "Everything okay?" Lena's voice was low, barely audible. "Drive where?" "Downtown," she said. And as the car pulled away from the home that no longer felt like hers, Lena didn't look back. She closed her eyes and let the silence wrap around her. Not the silence of peace, but of betrayal so deep, so sharp that words would only weaken it. This wasn't grief. Not yet. This was the moment just before the storm, when everything is unbearably still. The city blurred past the window as the cab slid silently through traffic. But Lena Whitmore's mind was sharper than it had been in days. The pain in her chest from the surgery was nothing compared to the quiet burn building inside her now. There was no fury, no trembling rage, just a deep pulsing clarity. Something had snapped back into place when she saw Victor Dalton with that stranger in their bed. The man he had become wasn't the man she'd married. He wasn't worth another second of heartbreak, but that didn't mean he would walk away untouched. "Take me downtown," she told the driver again. And 20 minutes later, They pulled up in front of a modest but familiar brick building tucked between two high-rises. Lena stepped out slowly, overnight bag still slung over her shoulder, hospital bracelet barely cut from her wrist. She didn't bother fixing her hoodie or checking the dark circles under her eyes. None of it mattered now. Not her appearance, not her image, only the outcome. Julian Marks had been her friend for years, an old buddy from the days when Lena fixed computers on the side while transitioning out of the military. Julian had since become one of the sharpest attorneys in the city, and he owed Lena more than a few favors. When Lena walked into the office unannounced, Julian looked up from behind his desk, startled. "You're supposed to still be in the hospital." Lena closed the door gently behind her. Plans changed. Julian motioned to the seat across from him. "What happened?" Lena sat down without a word, reached into her bag, and pulled out a thick folder. She placed it on the table with care, like setting down a loaded weapon. "He's been cheating," she said flatly. "I saw them in our bed today." Julian blinked, his brow tightening. "Victor was some professor," Lena added. "I didn't get her name. I didn't need to." Her voice was calm, measured, too calm, the kind of calm that made men nervous. She tapped the folder once. "Everything you need is in there." Julian opened it slowly, flipping through page after page of bank statements, property deeds, signed trust documents, power of attorney forms, private account summaries, and a quiet trail of financial restructuring. "You already moved everything," Julian said, glancing up. "Months ago." Lena nodded once. "The house, the business, the savings transferred, consolidated, locked. He still thinks he has access to all of it." Julian sat back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. "He has no idea you prepared for this." "He never bothered to notice," Lena said. "And now he's going to find out what he never cared to understand." Julian kept scanning the file, his tone shifting from curiosity to respect. "You restructured the company into a trust last year, made yourself the sole beneficiary. He didn't even update his power of attorney after the wedding." "No, I made sure he didn't think he had to." Lena's eyes were like steel now. He wanted the illusion of control. "I gave it to him." "And now?" Julian asked. "Now I want the papers filed today. Divorce with full documentation. Let him get served before he even figures out the bank accounts are frozen." "Do you want temporary restraining orders?" "Yes. And I want to flag the joint account. He's been siphoning money, some of which came from my VA disability benefits. That qualifies for federal review." "Jesus," Julian muttered. "You're going scorched earth." Lena stood up. "No, I'm not destroying anything. I'm preserving what's mine." She paused, then looked Julian in the eye. "He made his choice. I'm just making sure he lives with it." Julian picked up his phone. "Give me 2 hours." Lena nodded. "I'll be back. Keep everything confidential." She turned without another word, walked out of the office, and stepped into the afternoon sun like a woman not recovering from surgery, but rising from a battlefield. It wasn't revenge, not yet. But it was the first move on a board Victor never realized he was playing. By the time the sun began to slip behind the skyline, the house Lena Whitmore once called home had already begun its transformation from a space of warmth and shared memories to a calculated fortress that no longer belonged to Victor Dalton. The locksmith arrived within hours of her meeting with Julian Marks. Lena didn't wait. Every lock on every door was replaced. The garage opener was reprogrammed. The home security system, once installed with Victor's preferences in mind, was reset entirely. The passcode he had chosen, his birthday of course, was erased from the system. Lena called the alarm company herself and had him listed as unauthorized access. No notifications, no warnings, just silence, precision, one step at a time. She moved through the house with deliberate ease, removing the keys he had duplicated, collecting the spare sets, changing out the hidden lockbox codes. This wasn't an outburst. It was a transition, one he would never see coming. Next came the finances. The joint checking account, once a shared resource, was frozen within 10 minutes of her request. Lena moved the remaining $23,000 into a private account Victor had never known existed. She'd opened it months ago under a separate trust name, quietly redirecting dividend payouts and service income. The banker, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, barely blinked when Lena explained the need for immediate restriction of Victor's access. "He's been using the card like it's bottomless," she said calmly. "He hasn't checked the balance today, but he will." The banker nodded, printed out a confirmation form, and handed it to her with quiet respect. "You're not the first." she said softly, but you might be the most prepared. Not prepared, Lena replied, just done pretending. After that, she made one more call to the luxury dealership, where Victor's beloved SUV had been leased under Lena's name. He always boasted it was his. Loved to talk about the leather seats and backup cameras as if he paid for them himself. But Lena knew better. She had negotiated the buyback clause when they signed the lease. And now, with a single signature and a scan of her ID, the dealership agreed to send a team to collect the vehicle that same afternoon. No notice to him, no confrontation, just gone. By early evening, Lena stood across the street in the passenger seat of Julian's black SUV, sipping a coffee slowly as she watched the final act unfold. Victor walked up the driveway first, followed closely by Evan Carlisle, his smug affair partner. They looked relaxed, confident, maybe even happy. He reached into his purse, pulled out his key, and inserted it into the door. It didn't turn. He tried again. Nothing. A moment passed. Confusion crept across his face. Evan stepped forward, tried his own key, probably a spare he'd given him, also useless. Victor knocked, then banged. His voice rose. Lena, open the door. This isn't funny. Lena didn't move. Julian handed her the coffee. You good? He asked. Lena nodded once in control. Let him scream, she murmured. Evan's voice joined in now, louder, frustrated. Yo, man, come on. Don't make this a thing. We're not here to fight. Lena took another sip. She didn't look angry. She didn't even look interested. She looked finished. Victor's knocking became pounding. His tone shifted from anger to panic. His card had just been declined at the gas station, he said. Evan's card too. He couldn't understand. Lena, please. Lena set the empty coffee cup down in the console and turned to Julian. Let's go. As the SUV pulled away from the curb, Lena looked back one last time. Victor had collapsed on the porch, shoulders shaking. Evan stood off to the side, face lit by the screen of his phone, probably trying to figure out where the car had gone. Lena didn't smile. She didn't wave. She didn't gloat. She simply watched. Then she turned forward, eyes clear, voice steady. Checkmate. There were no raised voices, no thrown objects, no final arguments, just quiet removal. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was reclamation. She wasn't the victim anymore. She was the one holding the board. The morning after the lockout, Lena Whitmore sat on the patio of a quiet downtown hotel, watching the world move on without her. The sun rose clean and golden between the high-rise buildings. People passed with coffees in hand and earbuds in, all chasing routines. For the first time in days, she felt nothing. No sting, no ache, just a stillness that came when the anger was gone and only purpose remained. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then again. 10 missed calls from Victor Dalton, 5 from an unknown number. A voicemail. She didn't listen. She already knew what the voice would say. Confusion, excuses, maybe fake concern. None of it mattered now. Instead, Lena opened her laptop and logged into the secure client portal Julian Marks had set up for her. Everything was lined up. Divorce papers filed. Petition for a temporary restraining order filed, supported by video footage pulled directly from the home's security system. Yes, Lena had reviewed the recordings. He hadn't even bothered to close the blinds. The camera in the hallway caught it all. His laughter, the bed shifting, the betrayal made real in digital timestamps. The footage would speak for itself in court, but it had already spoken loud enough to Lena. Next, she reviewed the documents for the civil suit. Victor had withdrawn thousands from their joint savings account over the last several months. Money Lena had quietly moved back and forth while preparing her financial exit. What made it worse and legally actionable was the fact that a portion of that money came directly from her military disability benefits, federal VA-protected funds. Victor had either ignored that detail or didn't care. Either way, it gave Lena the green light to file for fraud and potential felony-level misappropriation. If he returned the money, it would be handled civilly. If he didn't, it would become criminal. She didn't care which path it took. The outcome would be the same. He would lose. But that wasn't all. Lena clicked into another folder and opened the email draft she had been crafting since 3 a.m. It was addressed to the Title IX office and the Office of Academic Integrity at the local university, where Victor worked part-time in administration, and where Evan Carlisle, His affair partner held a tenured faculty position. The message was concise, formal, and backed with documentation. Screenshots of Victor's calendar entries showing personal time taken during work hours, location data that placed him at Evan's office or faculty housing during those windows, and receipts, gas, food, and even a short-term rental payment, all charged to the joint account. The implication was clear. A faculty member engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a university staffer, both using school hours and resources. It wasn't just a scandal, it was policy violation territory. Lena attached the evidence in a zipped file and clicked send. Less than 2 hours later, she received a response. "Thank you for your report. This matter has been forwarded to the Office of Academic Integrity and Human Resources for immediate review." That was enough. She didn't need to see the fallout. She just needed to know the first domino had tipped. Later that day, Victor sent a text. "Please, can we just talk? Everything's gotten out of control. We didn't mean to hurt you like this." Lena almost laughed. They hadn't meant to hurt her. They just hadn't thought she would fight back. They'd expected quiet collapse. A woman too stunned to retaliate. Instead, they got silence and strategy. They got a woman who understood patience. A woman who knew that real damage didn't come from shouting. It came from precision. Evan Carrill would soon be facing an internal investigation. His name was already flagged in the financial trail Victor left behind. Transfers from their joint account to Evan's Venmo, some labeled as "thank you" or "getaway weekend." Rookie mistakes, traceable ones. Lena didn't need revenge. She needed truth. And the truth, when organized into affidavits, timestamps, and policy violations, spoke louder than any confrontation ever could. By nightfall, the storm was no longer inside her. It had moved outside into courtrooms, into inboxes, into HR departments and compliance offices. And Lena, she simply sat in silence, drinking black coffee, reading the final line of the university's follow-up email one more time. If confirmed, disciplinary action may include suspension or termination. That would do. The board was still moving, but the game was no longer in their hands. The Sunday afternoon air was heavy with the kind of suburban stillness that tried to appear serene, but always felt staged. Lena Whitmore pulled into the driveway of the Dalton residence, meticulously trimmed hedges, porch decor for every season, and a mailbox that probably hadn't seen a late bill in 20 years. She stepped out of the car in a dark button-down and slacks, carrying nothing but a slim charcoal folder tucked under her arm. No fanfare, no ceremony, just purpose. The house belonged to Harold and Beatrice Dalton, Victor's parents, people who had spent 12 years offering polite smiles dipped in condescension. Harold had once told Lena at Thanksgiving with his wine glass hovering just above judgment, "You're not exactly the woman we prayed for, but at least you pay the bills." The door opened before she could knock. Victor stood there in worn jeans and a t-shirt that didn't match his usual polished image. His face paled the moment he saw her. "What are you doing here?" Lena's voice was calm, even. "I brought something for your parents." Beatrice appeared in the doorway behind her son like a ghost summoned by tension. Her eyes narrowed and the familiar smirk formed. "Oh, the ghost returns." Lena didn't flinch. "May I come in?" Victor hesitated. Beatrice tilted her head. "It's fine. Let the woman speak." They led her to the living room where Harold sat in his recliner, flipping half-heartedly through a golf magazine. Lena remained standing. "5 minutes," Victor muttered. "Less," she promised. She placed the folder on the glass coffee table, opened it slowly, and pulled out the first document. A printed spreadsheet detailing $38,270 in unauthorized withdrawals from the joint account she had once shared with Victor. The rows included timestamps, transaction notes, and one particular transfer labeled "Weekend Cabin" sent directly to Evan Carroll's Venmo. "This," Lena said, looking at Harold, "is what your son did with our savings." She set the next paper down. It was an email printout from the university's Office of Academic Integrity, confirming an open investigation into Evan and Victor for inappropriate workplace conduct. They used school property, school hours, and your son's position in admin to make this affair more convenient. She slid it toward Beatrice without breaking eye contact. "It's already been escalated to HR." The third document was the one that drew the most silence, a copy of the new deed to the home Victor thought he still had rights to. Lena pointed to the notarized transfer of ownership dated 3 weeks before he had been locked out. The house was legally sold to a private buyer, she said. Simon Keller, my cousin, he leased it back to me short-term under a private agreement, which means every night Victor spent there after I changed the locks, he was trespassing. Beatrice's face twisted. You're bluffing. Lena didn't respond. She simply turned the page toward Harold, who now read with tightened brows and thin lips. Victor began to tremble, his arms folding tightly against his chest. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, he said quietly. Lena raised a brow. Good. Then you'll understand I'm also filing to recover the missing funds, and I've documented misuse of VA disability benefits. That's a federal felony. Then came the final document. She placed it on the table like a closing argument. One single sheet. A mortgage assistance cancellation notice. This is what I stopped paying last week, she said, addressing Beatrice and Harold directly. For the past 18 months, I've been quietly covering your monthly mortgage payments. I never said a word. Planned to surprise you with a payoff in December. She shrugged. But things change. Beatrice's smirk vanished. Harold dropped the magazine onto the floor. Victor's eyes welled with something that looked like regret. But Lena didn't care. For 12 years, she said, her voice low and razor-sharp. I showed up. I worked. I protected your son's reputation. I paid the bills. I defended him when no one else did. And in return, I came home from the hospital and found him with another woman in my bed. She turned to Beatrice. And you? You encouraged it. You never thought I measured up. So now I'm finally living down to your expectations. She closed the folder and tucked it back under her arm. As she walked to the door, voices erupted behind her. Victor pleading, Beatrice sobbing, Harold shouting. Lena didn't turn around. She opened the door herself, stepped outside, and closed it behind her without a sound. It wasn't revenge. It was justice served not with fury, but with facts. Not with yelling, but with truth. She didn't need them to like her. She only needed them to understand that everything they once looked down on had now risen above them. The silence that followed was louder than any confrontation could ever be. Weeks passed and Lena Whitmore didn't say a word. Not to Victor Dalton, not to anyone in his world. She didn't need to. The consequences had already started unraveling, one thread at a time, pulling apart the illusion he had built around himself. It began with the eviction notice. Victor had ignored the warnings at first, assuming Lena's coldness was temporary and that the house was still his by some twisted logic. But when 2 sheriff's deputies arrived in uniform, posted the order publicly on the front door, and gave him 24 hours to vacate, reality hit like a slap. Neighbors watched from behind blinds as he pleaded, cried, and ultimately packed his things in silence. Evan Carril wasn't there to help. He had his own disaster to manage. The university acted faster than anyone expected. The Title IX report Lena filed with documentation of Victor and Evan's involvement during working hours and on school property had triggered a full internal review. The emails, time logs, and payment receipts Lena had quietly collected were more than enough to prompt disciplinary action. Evan was suspended immediately. Within days, his tenure was rescinded. The board issued a statement citing violations of academic ethics. His pension, once locked in for retirement, was stripped. And when the screenshots surfaced, photos of Victor and Evan together during work hours, some sent from university servers, the faculty message boards lit up with shock. But the final blow didn't come from the university. It came from Rachel Carril, Evan's wife. She hadn't known. Not really. Not until she received a manila envelope in the mail, sent anonymously, of course, with beach selfies, payment receipts, and one particularly cruel message from Victor's phone. He makes me feel alive again. Rachel filed for divorce the following week. As for Victor, the spiral continued, his parents, Beatrice and Harold Dalton, refused to answer his calls. The humiliation from Lena's visit still echoed through their social circles. Beatrice stopped attending her country club lunches. Harold withdrew from his weekly golf group. Whispers followed them. Mortgage collectors, once held at bay by Lena's quiet payments, now called daily. Victor moved in with a former coworker temporarily before settling for a 1-bedroom apartment near a shopping plaza. And then came the job, the only one he could get, a retail position at a home goods store. The same kind of job he used to mock publicly. That's what you do when you have no ambition, he once posted. Now he wore the uniform, scanned barcodes, smiled through gritted teeth. Still, he tried to rewrite the narrative. On social media, Victor cast himself as the victim. He posted vague quotes about emotional abuse, gaslighting, healing, shared blurry selfies with tearful captions. He claimed Lena had cut him off without compassion and used her influence to ruin his life. People, some friends, some strangers sent supportive comments, heart emojis, encouragement. For a moment, he almost had them until Lena replied. She didn't use her real name. She created a burner account. One comment, one question posted beneath one of his emotional status updates. Didn't you mock your disabled wife while she was in the hospital sleeping with your affair partner in her bed? Curious if that's in your next post, too. The comment gained traction fast. Dozens of likes, shares, people started asking questions. Friends unfollowed. Some deleted him entirely. The carefully curated image Victor had clung to, glossy, broken, misunderstood, crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth. Lena never replied again. She didn't need to. She watched it all unfold from a distance, never once stepping forward to gloat. No press releases, no phone calls, no revenge fantasies played out in public. Just silence. Purposeful, sharp, complete silence. She wasn't celebrating. She wasn't even angry anymore. She was simply done. And Victor, he was finally alone. Not the kind of loneliness you feel after a fight. The kind that settles in when you realize you've burned every bridge, exhausted every lie, and now stand alone in the ashes of what you built. Lena didn't forgive him. She never said she would, but she didn't destroy him either. He did that all on his own. 1 year later, Lena Whitmore woke to the quiet lapping of lake water against the wooden dock outside her cabin. The air was cool, the sky washed in early hues of soft gold and blue. Birds sang, the kind of gentle melody that came with places untouched by chaos. The cabin was modest, 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, a fireplace that crackled through the winter. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Tucked on the edge of a small lake near the VA hospital, it offered everything she needed and nothing she didn't. She went fishing some mornings, not because she expected to catch anything, but because standing knee-deep in the stillness did something for her soul. Some afternoons she volunteered, helping fellow veterans navigate paperwork, housing applications, or just sitting with them while they talked about the weight they still carried. She understood that kind of weight better than most. Not the kind that comes from war, but from betrayal. With the help of Julian Marks, Lena had launched a nonprofit 6 months ago, a quiet but powerful initiative aimed at helping military families secure legal representation, temporary housing, and emergency funds. It was funded in part by donations, in part by her own resources, but primarily by one consistent deposit, $5,231.90, transferred like clockwork on the first of every month. Court-ordered restitution. Victor Dalton's signature repayment for the money he took from their shared account, some of which included Lena's protected VA disability benefits. She never touched the money personally. Every cent went into the nonprofit, not out of spite, but out of purpose. Something broken had to become something useful. She believed in that now. People sometimes asked if she missed him. If, in the quiet moments she thought about what could have been, she always gave the same answer. I don't miss him. I miss who I thought he was. She hadn't seen Victor since that day in his parents' living room. She had no idea where he was now. The restitution continued, but his voice, his image, his chaos, none of it followed her here. He had tried to reach out once early on through his attorney. Julian had handled it. Lena never responded. There was nothing left to say. She held no hatred. That surprised even her. For a long time, she'd imagined she would carry rage for years, that she'd replay the betrayal like a film on loop, unable to let it go. But standing on the dock one morning, mist curling off the lake, she realized something profound. Hatred is a chain. Forgiveness isn't always a gift you give the other person. It's the bolt cutter that frees you from their grip. Lena didn't forgive Victor in the traditional sense. She didn't excuse him. She didn't justify what he did, but she released him. She let him go, not with mercy, but with finality. There would be no return, no reunion, no second act. Some people destroy their chance, and the most powerful response is to keep walking. Inside the cabin, the nonprofit's latest report sat printed on the dining table. 5 families assisted this quarter. 1 veteran reunited with his kids after a bitter custody fight. Another received emergency shelter after eviction. Lena read through the names slowly, quietly, proud. None of them would ever know the story behind the funding. They didn't need to. That wasn't the point. Later that day, she took a walk down the gravel trail behind the cabin, stopping at a small wooden bench that faced the water. The breeze was gentle, her heart was steady. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't looking backward. People often mistake silence for weakness. They assume peace means surrender. But Lena knew better. She had been the quietest woman in the room, and she had won not through revenge, but through clarity. Not through violence, but through truth. This wasn't revenge. This was closure. And closure, when earned, is the loudest silence of all. Some betrayals don't deserve confrontation. They deserve consequences. Lena Whitmore's story reminds us that strength isn't always loud, and dignity isn't something others can strip away unless we let them. In silence, she reclaimed her life. In strategy, she protected her peace. And in walking away without looking back, she taught us this. Healing begins not when they apologize, but when we stop waiting for it. Closure isn't revenge. It's choosing yourself without needing their permission. So, if you've ever been broken, remember this. You don't have to burn down their house. You just have to stop letting them live in yours.